I'm Mike Dowdy, and this is the School Leadership Show. I'm back for round 2 with my favorite professional office organizer, Kacy Paide. She and I go a second round on getting and staying organized. Kacy shares many strategies and tips to help us all get our acts together. From the perils of too many systems to the power of structures, we get into lots of different areas of organization and productivity in general. You can learn more about Kacy and her work at theinspiredoffice.com. I can't say enough about Kacy's work and how much she's helped me become more organized, efficient, and effective at work and at home. I hope you enjoy this follow-up interview with Kacy Paide. I'm here with Kacy Paide, professional office organizer. Kacy, thanks for joining me again.
Of course. Very excited to be here again.
And we have a lot to talk about because I think several things have changed in both of our lives since last we talked, and I can't even remember when that was, but you've had a couple things change in your life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest one was I was married in September. And that's super exciting and going really well. And as a professional organizer, that's, of course, an adjustment as well, combining 2 households into one. But we're super happy.
Awesome. And I started a new job, and I went from an educational service agency to a large suburban school district in a similar role as a deputy superintendent. But I want to talk a little bit about my transition and kind of get some help from you too. So
sure.
That's sort of where I am with the free advice. But but I know we had talked, we had exchanged some emails a while back, and you had shared that you did some work specifically around organizing or helping school administrators organize their offices. I thought that might be a cool place for us to start.
Absolutely. And it's funny, to back up a bit, of course, I get this call in early summer, late spring 2016 from a school, a head of a private school who wanted to bring me out to Mississippi to work. And she couldn't remember where she found me. She just said, I've been following your blog for a while, and I don't know what led me to your blog, but it would only make sense that I'm just going to assume she found me through your podcast, because it was such a direct line I could draw between my last podcast with you and her calling me.
And I will totally accept that.
Yeah. So I'll give you the credit for that. And it was just an incredible experience, which, you can dig into with me as much as you'd like. But to give some background, I'm a professional organizer focusing on offices and paper here in DC. I live in Silver Spring, Maryland. And for the most part, I work with clients in the area 3 hours at a time. I travel a bit. So for somebody from Mississippi to call is a little off the beaten path for me, even though I've traveled, particularly to the South. And for her to say, this is not a home office or even a downtown type office, but a private school, and I want you to work with all of my administrators over the course of 3 days, was quite a departure, but one I jumped on. I was so excited, and we pulled it off, and it could not have gone better. And
okay, so
lots of stories to share.
Excellent. So let's talk about, how did you get into it? So you show up at the school, right? And then what?
Yeah, so essentially in my first couple of calls with her, she said, I've been following your blog. I have a pretty good grasp on what you do and your creative way of organizing offices and people's time. You essentially tell me what you want to do. And I thought, well, I'm really enjoying giving workshops these days. I'm really hearing from a lot of my clients and workshop attendees that they want a lot more on time management. Some are interested in Evernote, and I can kind of tease everybody with workshops the first day. And then how about we go ahead and have you arrange a sign-up chart so people can sign up anywhere from 1 to 2+ hours with me. So when I showed up, she had that all set up. I had even given her a shopping list of some of my favorite supplies to have on hand, and we hit the ground running. I gave 2 back-to-back workshops that morning, one on workflow, productivity, time management, one on classic office organizing. And then I immediately jumped into working with a total of, I think it was 12 members of the staff and administrators back to back over the course of 3 long days.
Wow, that's so cool. So as you were working, so I imagine just like people are different, school administrators are different. So you probably, everybody had a little different spin on what they were doing. Anything that, like, any sort of commonalities or entry points for people in general where you were like, okay, this is where we got to start?
I have to say, actually, it was not as classic office organizing heavy as I had expected. And it was totally in line with kind of a direction my business has taken in the last year or so, which is what I like to call organizing people's heads. And it's just something that's sort of these conversations that have risen from people just kind of dumping on me. And people always say, I'm so sorry, I'm just rambling. And I've learned that when I really just sit there quietly and let people, quote unquote, ramble about what they need from their profession, from their office, from their day, from their time, from their planner, my mind starts compartmentalizing and grouping like with like amongst their thoughts and their concerns and their words the same way I do with paper. And that turns into a very productive conversation about, well, you know, usually the paper is what I like to call the maybe the Trojan horse or the gateway drug that gets me in there. But then we realize, you know, we've really got to rearrange your morning and how you start your day, or we really have to rethink the way you close out your day or close out your week so you can leave with a sense of accomplishment. Or we really need to master your to-dos, because on the surface, the paper problem is unsightly, but it's actually all items that require action from you. And I understand that when you've got 25 sheets of paper out and they represent 25 different to-dos, that's stressful as well. So every day, every week, every year, I go much deeper with my work, and to see that many people back to back was very sort of career affirming about the direction my work has taken, and that the paper or the disorganization we see on the surface is always indicative of, I hate to call it a deeper problem, that feels so heavy, but a greater way I can help. And that's, like I said, anything from organizing somebody's time or just shifting their perspective, motivating them in a different way. And paper is usually where we start, but not always where we end.
Well, and it's interesting because I imagine the outward signs are just manifestations of what's going on underneath or in that person's head.
Absolutely.
So let's go down that rabbit hole then. Let's talk about to-do lists, because this is something that, so I switched jobs. It's a different pace. There's just a lot more happening. And I used to have a little to-do list of like a quarter of an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper that I would just kind of carry around in my shirt pocket, and that's where I would write my things down. Now I am back to using, well, I don't know if I was ever there, but like a steno notebook where I just keep writing. I'm writing the same to-dos over and over again, and I'm crossing them off, and then I'm writing things on there after I've already accomplished them and crossing them off because I need the little win. So help me, Kacy.
I can help you by saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And people are always relieved to find out that as digital as I am, and I'm an Evernote consultant, and I eat, breathe, sleep, teach Evernote all the time, my to-dos are almost exclusively still on paper as well. So I like to study people very quickly in the beginning. If you're truly a digital person, let's organize your to-dos digitally. If you're truly a pen to paper person, let's stick to pen to paper and maybe fluff that up and make it tighter for you. 99 out of 100 of my clients are pen to paper, and they're so relieved when I say, let's keep the pen to paper notebook system. But
Okay, so that I got to jump in because of course it's affirming to hear you say that. Thank you. But
Mm-hmm.
like how I so badly want that to-do list and task management thing to be digital, but I can't get there. I don't
Yeah.
know why.
I think I've got it figured out because I absolutely cannot either. The only to-dos I have in Evernote is where I digitally keep them are the ones I share between my virtual assistant and myself because we have this shared notebook that we go into in our weekly calls, and it's usually for her to check in on me, not the other way around. But there are no triggers. There are no visual cues because we go to our computers, we go to this single screen to do anything from look up a recipe to watch the news, to type emails, to read the newspaper, to look at our to-do lists, to write an outline, like, schedule the kids' events. And everything happens from that one screen. So our brain is conditioned to sit at this one screen and just turn to scrambled eggs. Whereas you turn to your hard copy notes, your notebook, and even if your notebook isn't only for to-dos, maybe you use your notebook for, let's just say 10 things, whereas you go to your computer and you turn to your computer for 1,000 different things. So that's already a win, and that's already somewhat calming on your mind. To turn to something other than your computer. And that's also a physical thing. I've got clients who keep, the steno notebook, whatever, scraps of paper, spiral notebook, clipboard, and that physical object floating around you or orbiting around your computer or your desk is something visually you attach to your to-dos or your notes. I don't know if that makes sense. That I can't take full credit from that. As I'm kind of speaking these words, I'm realizing they're heavily influenced by one of my favorite reads from last summer, which is The Organized Mind. And if I recall correctly, the author Daniel Levitin is a big fan of going to physically different spaces and places for different actions, different functions. So it was affirming for me to read that, and it made sense. That's why I want to go to my notebook for this and my computer for that.
Oh, that's very cool. Yeah, and I totally get that. I don't know. I have this nagging thing like every time I see that steno, and I'm just like, oh, it's so inefficient. But is it really? I guess that's kind of what I have to step back and look at.
Yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But it's also most to-do lists that I see, even after we've kind of reworked them and test them, are imperfect. What I teach in my workshops and my clients is that every day, for the most part, is different. There are some days where we have mastery over 3 glorious hours. There are some days where we feel like we only have mastery over 20 minutes. And in many cases, we need a very different to-do list for these different types of days. So I like to teach there's a vast amount of variety amongst the ways we can contextualize our handwritten to-dos. My to-do list changes, it's hard to say, every couple of weeks at a minimum, every couple of months at a maximum. It's not like, if I were to give you a tour of my own to-do list, as it stands right now, it's 3 different sticky notes on the counter next. I always work at my dining table. So I've got one for the Inspired Office Creative, one for the Inspired Office Administrative, and one for Personal. Those 3 stickies I've only been using since about January 1st. Before that, I was doing almost all of my to-dos in a notebook. I like to sit with people and get really creative about how we work a notebook page. So sometimes we just kind of draw a line down the middle and it's personal, professional. Sometimes we draw a line down the middle and it's like with my Inspired Office Creative versus Administrative. Creative, of course, would be like writing a blog post or building my course. Administrative is send that email, make that phone call, order that thing. I remember when I was planning my wedding, I was always dividing my notebook page into quadrants. and contextualizing by the same four to-do task types for much of 2016. And I had the Inspired Office in one corner, wedding planning in another corner. I think things to delegate to my assistant or discuss with her in one corner and personal in the other. And I found a rhythm with that. And then after the wedding was done, I changed to something completely different. So that's all to say, I like to give people permission to switch it up as needed. I have clients who switch it up every day. I switch it up every couple of months.
And I think that's a great point. That I think, a lot of people talk about our lives having seasons, and that things do change over time, and it's okay to mix up your system if you don't need part of it anymore, or some part can be tweaked to make it better. Now, you mentioned before, so you're an Evernote consultant, and Evernote kind of acts as your external brain. You want to give the quick Evernote pitch, because I would need tutoring on that too, because I'm struggling. My external brain is my Google Drive for now, but I'm not. Okay. I'm not loving it.
Sure. So to give some background, I've been using Evernote since about 2012, and I was in the same boat a lot of my clients are, and that they'd heard of it, maybe they'd even downloaded it. I had the app on my phone and my computer, and every couple of months I would open it up, and I couldn't make heads or tails of it. I didn't love the interface. I just couldn't see how it would work for me until I started working with a client who was big into Evernote. And as we were organizing her desk in her office, she taught me how to Evernote a lot of these scraps of paper for her. So she would push me a page of a magazine, and she'd say, could you Evernote that article in the corner? Or there would be a tear out full of her scribbles, notes on something. She'd say, can you ever note this sheet of paper? Can you ever note the poem out of this book? And I learned firsthand how to use it. And I watched her Evernote shape up to really become her brain. I like to call Evernote, I don't know if I came up with this or if I heard it recently, but lately I've been calling it your own personal internet. And essentially Evernote it's an app. I almost hate calling it an app because that equates it with this, tiny little thing on your phone that has a single function. But it's where you save any and all information. So it's important to know how Evernote is different from Google Drive, Dropbox, Box, your hard drive. All of those really can only store, for the most part, a proper document. You go there, you see folders, and in those folders you have proper files that are like a PDF, Excel, or Doc, so on and so forth. And Evernote is organized by notebooks. I almost like to equate those notebooks as like, not so much file folders, but like file drawers. I draw a lot of parallels between digital organizing and hard copy organizing. And essentially, you start by creating notebooks. To give you some idea, I have 3 or 4 for the Inspired Office. The rest are personal, trips and travel and food and wine and health and yoga and so on and so forth. And those notebooks hold notes. The beauty of Evernote's notes is that a single note can hold maybe a screenshot you've dragged in, which is a JPEG. It can hold a PDF. It can hold a Word document. It can hold an Excel document. You can type directly into that note and begin to give context to these things that you're saving. An Evernote client I recently had is actually in sales, and he was showing me some Excel reports he had saved in Google Drive. Evernote is compatible with Google Drive, but it doesn't actually necessarily have to be for the point I'm illustrating. But I showed him how to save an Excel document from Google Drive into Evernote. And what that allowed him to do was create to-dos for him, linked to that document. So he's like, oh, well, I bring up this Excel document every week with one of my employees, and it triggers all of these to-dos for me. And now, married to that Excel document living in Evernote, he has these neat little checklists, like, make an edit in line 127, call so-and-so mentioned in line 25. And that's just one of a million examples of how you can marry information across different documents, different media. You can clip from the web an entire article. It's far superior to bookmarking, because then Evernote is searching the entire body of the article or the web page that you've clipped. You can forward emails into Evernote, which is usually the aha moment for my client when they're like, oh my goodness, this changes everything. A lot of times we keep emails in folders because they're resources. They're one day maybe, or I don't want to lose track of this. But we're then limited to the subject of the email as it was sent to us. Whereas I can forward an email into my Evernote and I can tag it examples to use or graphic design. And then I can make a note at the top of the email to myself and say, I really love the style, the font used in this sender's newsletter, so on and so forth. And it holds everything in a way that is contextualized, that's useful, that's searchable, instead of having information in email folders and on Google Drive and on your hard drive and on your desktop. Everything's under one roof. You organize it the way you want. You call it what you want. You tag it what you want. And moral of the story is it's almost impossible to lose something on Evernote. As with anything, I'd say we probably only use 20% of what we're actually saving, the 80-20 rule. But you have that peace of mind of knowing anything I throw into Evernote, if life triggers me to recall that email, that example, that lesson, that resource, I can find it within seconds.
Very cool.
Sorry, that was a long explanation.
No, it's what I needed. I have to do something. I just have to decide and go down a path. But I want to take you back to your work with the school administrators. So thinking about their space and the feeling that they're probably trying to evoke from their space, or the extent to which their office helps them focus or hinders them from focusing and getting work done. What were some of the things that you noticed that you were able to kind of work people through fixing or making better for themselves as part of your work over those 3 days? What were some of the big that, like, at the end of it, people were like, oh man, my life is different now?
Story that comes to mind first is I worked the most with the head of the school's assistant, who wears many hats, and in her words, she wears many hats. So as soon as she said that, as I was standing in her office that was somewhat challenged, I asked,
wait a second, okay, her office was somewhat challenged. What, you're going to have to be a little more specific. There
was paper everywhere. It was actually a large office, so she had the luxury of a lot of space, but it was poorly used. She had a long counter behind her desk that was just covered in paper, folders, boxes, you name it. Her desk was covered. She had this rolling cart. Maybe you can picture, they have rainbow drawers, and the drawers are only about 2 inches deep. And she fell victim to it the way a lot of my clients do when they see this wonderful office organizing gadget and they think, oh, I'm going to bring that into my office and it's going to hold 12 different types of paper. But once she's going through it with the organizer, she realizes most of the drawers are empty and 100% of the things in there are trash. So she actually had something I see often, and that's too many systems, too many gadgets, too many different types of folders. And none of them, she hadn't really committed to any, therefore none of them were working. So as with everybody, I sit down and help her figure out early on in the game what her categories are. And she kept using the language of, I wear so many hats. I'm in charge of managing the facilities. I'm in charge of managing my boss's travel. I'm in charge of managing, there was 4 or 5 things. So as she's telling me those stories and I'm sorting through paper one at a time, let's say she wore 5 different hats, I'm creating 5 different piles. And eventually those 5 different piles turned into 5 different open top file boxes that lined up along that countertop behind her desk. So if you can picture it, I don't think there were any file drawers, file cabinets in her office, but effectively we were still able to create file folder categories for those in a very open, accessible way. And she was so excited because now, essentially, in theory, everything that comes across her desk will land in one of those boxes, because she and I together were able to see what those five hats that she wore. And once we came up with that solution, it moved really quickly. I think I worked with her initially for 2 hours. That's where we came up with the solution and the plan. And then I think I worked with her 24 hours later. And at that point, she had done almost all of the work. It essentially was a show and tell. She was like, you gave me the formula. This made sense. I was able to clean my office in a couple hours.
Very cool. Now, in terms of the administrators themselves, so I told you I transitioned to this new gig, and the office I moved into had a big conference table that seats 8, and then this enormous desk with a return and a credenza, and I knew going in that I figured this is an opportunity, right, to sort of reinvent how I approach work. I think I've been reasonably efficient and effective over time. I like to think so. I'm still employed. And so I knew I didn't want the desk, because it was just going to be more flat surfaces and more places where I could put stuff. And, you know, my job is basically talking with people. I don't need a desk for that. I could use a conference table. Fine. So I finally got rid of the desk. So it's just a big conference table, you know, one file drawer, and I'm working really hard to give all of the paper to the assistant that I work with, because then I figure she'll know where it is, she can find it, I won't mess it up. And that I'm sort of getting there, but we're kind of learning each other a little bit too. So where did your administrators that you work with sort of land on that continuum?
And so far as what do they manage versus their assistant?
Yeah, like did any of them, as a result of the work, kind of go off in a different direction, like say, oh, you know, I'm going to hand all this stuff to my assistant now, and I'm going to focus on these things, and, you know, and change their sort of view of their role at all?
That's a good question. The only administrator I worked with at that school who had an assistant who carried a great deal of the administrative load was the head of the school. And I'm trying to picture it. She had probably 2 drawers of paper. Her assistant is the one I just described, where we kind of fixed her office with these open top file boxes. I don't think I worked with anybody else who was kind of working in tandem with an assistant, but they were, of course, naturally very intertwined. To work with one was to work with the other. We spent more time together really talking about their time, and I think how they pass things off to each other. That reminds me a lot of like when I work with couples, or when I work in a business with 2 business owners, or anybody who's working closely with a colleague. A lot of times the conversation goes in the direction of, how do I get things from my hand to your hand in a more efficient way than just dropping things on your computer or dropping things on your chair. And that's usually something that's understood and fixed in a short 2-minute conversation.
Okay, that's fascinating because I think, and that's, I think, more powerful than you even know, because just having the conversation is probably a step that 90% of people just don't do.
Right.
And I felt that I tried to started a new morning routine when I changed jobs because my start time was different. So I remember I sat down with Teresa, my wife, and I had sort of laid it out in kind of in painstaking detail from her perspective of kind of what I wanted to accomplish. And she looked at it, and her first reaction was, "Oh my God, you're so rigid. You know, you might not be in the shower at 6:42." And I said, "No, it's not about the time. It's about, you know, just the stuff I want to get done, and this is sort of how it fits together." But after we had the conversation, I learned after 15 years of marriage, and some things that I sort of suspected and stumbled on by accident, that she really doesn't want me anywhere near her in the morning while she's getting ready. Okay. And shame on me, shame on us for never like actually having that explicit conversation. So that I could say to her, okay, well, what's the earliest I could come up and get in the bathroom and get ready when when will you be done? And we worked it out, and I can't even describe how it just took the air out of the system. Like everybody's calm now in the morning.
That's incredible. So was it sort of this underlying tension that everybody became used to?
Yeah, I think so. I think it just became normal. Like that's how it is. We kind of, I like to talk to people in the morning. I'm happy to be up. Let's talk. And she would she would growl at me. That's not the kind of person she is in the morning. And so and it's so funny because I think as a couple, I
can relate to that.
You kind of like just fall into these patterns and sort of figure things out, at least think. Yep. But when we had the conversation, it was like an epiphany. It was like, oh my God. And we were both looking at each other like, it's so embarrassing that it took us 15 years to have this stupid conversation.
Right. That's great that you did, though. I mean, sometimes you just stumble into those, but at least it didn't take 25.
I guess that's a good way to look at it. But I imagine that just, getting folks to giving people permission or a venue or even a structure to have that conversation with the people that they work with. Like, how do you want to get this information?
Yeah.
Or even to be as explicit as to say, this is how I want you to give me the information.
Yeah, absolutely. To give you an example, a couple years back, I worked with a legal assistant. And she complained to me that the attorney she worked for was just throwing things on her chair, throwing things on her keyboard. And we realized he's giving her one of two things: receipts for his expenses and anything else. Like, she saw these two categories. It's either a receipt or it's not. And we designated this letter tray very close to her computer for incoming receipts. And she just simply informed him, hey, working with Kacy, from now on, I'm asking you to put the receipts in this letter tray. Boom, done. And she was like, oh my God, I can't believe he's actually doing it. It's changing my life. I'm not picking up receipts from behind the trash can 3 months late. And exactly the same conversations I have with couples. And there's a husband-wife. I'm working with the wife in Texas. They have a building, like design build company. And same thing with her husband. She recently had a conversation about, hey, the receipts go in this wall pocket, nowhere else. He's like, okay, done deal.
Well, and it's interesting because people, as much as people say they don't like, or they pretend they don't like structure or what they might call rigidity, we thrive on structure. It's what makes things work.
So true. So true. That reminds me of another story I love to tell. I know people like stories, and every time I talk, I am reminded of all these stories I have. I worked with this gentleman once in a home office here in DC, and we were going through his wife's files, old credit card files, and I said, hey, after we're done what we're working on, should we go through your wife's Visa folder? And he was like, Kacy, just tell me what to do. I will do whatever you tell me to do. And in that moment, I realized how people just want to be told what to do. If it's good advice, of course. But it just is such a relief to not have to churn it out yourself.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. So, where would you say, were there any big mistakes that people make when they set off to start organizing? Like, what are the big pitfalls? So somebody listening might say, yep, that's it. Tomorrow I'm doing it. I'm getting my office organized, and they charge off in a particular direction. What's the direction that we should not send them in?
Okay. Answer is coming to me as clear as day. You should not turn to thecontainerstore.com or staples.com or get in your car and drive to any of those places, because the products are not going to fix your problem. A lot of times people want to throw money and throw products and throw containers at the problem, when what you really need to do is just turn to the piles and go through them one at a time. There's no trick. There's nothing glamorous about it. When I work with clients, I, for the most part, am sitting across from them, each of us with a 2-inch stack of paper in our lap, and we're going through one paper at a time. I pick up one paper and I say, do we need this visa bill? Do we need this article? Do we need this medical record? And it feels painstaking at first, but give it a couple of minutes, give it a couple of hours, and once you see that this weight that you've been living under is actually getting smaller and smaller, it's a huge relief. And what I love about the work I do is you can feel that relief before it's done, before the end is ever in sight, because there's been such stagnation and inertia, or maybe it's been getting worse and actually moving in the wrong direction. But sometimes it only takes a couple of minutes to really turn that steering wheel and take the space and your mood in a different direction. Within 5 minutes, if you have 3 fewer sheets of paper, and today's the first day where your office is becoming lighter, not heavier, for a lot of my clients, that's all they need to find that fire in their belly. So it's really to do the hard work first. I hate to say it. Hard is probably not the best word I can use, but let's just say the substantive work of just digging through it and filling up that recycling bin and trash bin, and on one side and on the other side, just creating piles of categories, and those categories can change. You're not married to any of these categories or any of these sticky notes you put next to them. But my goal is always to fill the recycling bins and to create very smart categories amongst everything we've kept.
You have no idea how much I needed that little pep talk right now, because good. The administrator who had the office right before me left me just piles and piles of stuff. Like, you might need this. And we have a school break coming up that I have a feeling I'm going to be sitting at the conference table doing that. So I want to be sensitive to your time. If people want to work with you or want to learn more about your work, where's the best place to send them?
Oh, thank you. My website, for starters, is theinspiredoffice.com. Since we've spoken, I have finally put out my ebook. And that, of course, is very easy to find from my webpage, but it's my homepage, but it's theinspiredoffice.com/book. And I send a newsletter. For the most part, it's weekly. You can find that on multiple places on my website. Pretty much everything I have ever sent out on a newsletter is captured in my blog. So my blog is a bottomless pit, and I'm sharing anything from client stories. I love a good show and tell blog post. They're not always before and afters. What I really like to do is show the process. So like what you just asked, where do people start? It's not always pretty. And I like to share the process and just snapshots of what I've been working on in the last couple of weeks, and really illustrating with photos and client stories how we do this work, how I do this work. I share often how I used Evernote in the last week or two. Just quirky articles that others have put out on productivity and time management. Productivity and time management is a thread through a lot of what I share.
Do you have any other favorite productivity, either blogs or podcasts that you're into these days?
Oh my goodness, so many. My favorite podcast out there is the favorite of millions of people. I love the Tim Ferriss podcast.
Me too.
Oh my goodness. It's so useful. I just like anybody who puts out useful information. So of course the Tim Ferriss podcast I can't say enough about. Have you heard of a podcast called Design Matters?
No.
Debbie Millman, I think, is the woman who produces it and interviews. She is a big name in the world of design. Very famous graphic designer. And I think she actually has one of the older podcasts out there. I don't know if it originated as even a radio show. I think it's been around for over 10 years. In some ways, she's the female Tim Ferriss. Her interviewees are very design heavy. Graphic designers, screenwriters, producers, but rich with information and rituals and all of the reasons you love Tim Ferriss. I think you would love Design Matters. Asian Efficiency.
Asian Efficiency.
Yes, Asian Efficiency. He interviewed me years and years ago, long before I was ever listening to podcasts. I was like, I don't really know what a podcast is, but sure, you can interview me. And man, it's one of those podcasts you almost don't want to listen to in the car because you want to take so many notes.
Yep, I totally get it.
Yeah.
How about, have you ever listened to Mike Vardy, the Productivityist?
Oh, sure. Yes, I have. I get his newsletter too.
Yep.
I love his newsletter.
He's got some good stuff too.
Ari Meisel.
Ooh.
Ari Meisel. His business used to be under a different name. Now it's under Leverage. If you search podcasts, Ari Meisel or podcast Leverage, that would come up. And he's really big into automation.
Oh, cool.
It's a great one too.
So we know where people can go to work with you and get your help. Now I have a sort of an odd question. So let's say people, don't have access to a professional organizer, and they want to work together. Like a couple school administrators want to try to help one another get more organized and more efficient. Any suggestions for working together with somebody else in your organization?
Sure. A lot of times it just helps to get people talking. I do a year-end post every year. This year, I think it was 7 things I learned about organizing in 2016. And one thing I realized upon reflecting back on the year is just get people talking. As an organizer, I just get people talking. And you don't have to have these conversations with an organizer. You can choose a colleague you're comfortable with, or maybe they could facilitate a buddy system. And if you're in a safe place where you feel like you can articulate, 2 or 3 goals for the school year or whatever period of time you're thinking, and have an accountability buddy to hold you to that, is huge. That's very macro. It's not so much, turning to anybody for the steps and the solutions, but just really there's magic in those 2 things: simple goal setting and accountability. And once you know that your friend down the hall is going to check in with you. And I actually did this, come to think of it, at the very end of my work with the school in Mississippi. I did a closing, very casual workshop with them. And I had them choose buddies and write down their goals. And they had goals for, I think, the beginning of August and then the date for when the kids returned to school. So to kind of have these like cornerstones in the year as dates to reach your goal. And the buddies can check in with, you create something with your buddy so that you're checking in, be it every Friday, every Monday, or the first every month, so on and so forth. But I would absolutely start there.
Very cool. So Kacy Paide, theinspiredoffice.com.
Yes.
And thank you so much for another fantastic interview. So much here. I always appreciate the conversation and, more importantly, the validation.
Oh, you're welcome. Anytime.
So thank you.
You're doing just fine.
That's perfect. Exactly. You've been listening to the School Leadership Show. Send your comments, questions, and show ideas to mike@schoolleadershipshow.com. Consider rating the podcast in iTunes and leaving a comment. It helps other people find the show. And please pass the show along to your colleagues. Also, if you'd like, you can support the show on Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/leadership, you can help support the show, and I would appreciate it. Thanks.